I thank you all, and I'm going to ask each one of you. I'm going to ask each one of you to just make a brief observation about what you've heard your fellow panelists comment on that you might want to make a remark about, or anything else you'd like to add to your own testimony.
Sorry, I'll try to be brief. For other members of the committee who want more depth, I do recommend my book on the subject called The Impeachment of George W. Bush. It's a little bit out of date, but it's got a lot in it. I think the question for this committee is what is to be done now, and what can be done now. Prosecution is unrealistic. The administration will never prosecute itself. Truth commissions, the administration will stonewall them, as they have so many committees of Congress. So what is the realistic remedy? The only remedy, and that's the one the framers gave to the Congress of the United States, the House and the Senate, is the remedy of impeachment, because no one can interfere with it. The critically important thing about impeachment is that there is no executive privilege in impeachment. That becomes an impeachable offense. You ask the President to tell you what he knew and when he knew it. You ask the President or the Vice President to give you the contents of the FBI statement. They don't do that. That becomes an impeachable offense. You could ask them to provide them the information under oath. You may not be able to finish the task, but you certainly can start the task, which will send an important signal, not just to this president, but to future presidents, because I completely agree with Congressman Barr that this can only be a floor, and God help us if that's the case. I mean the country, the Constitution, our democracy.
Congressman Bob Barr.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. Many years ago, some of us older folks like yourself and myself recall we had a nuclear clock that would count down how close we were to nuclear Armageddon. And then back in the 1990s, I recall the national debt clock that would count up the amount over time of the national debt. Mr. Chairman, what we're facing now is a constitutional clock, and it is counting down what remains of the Constitution of this great land. If I might ask to be introduced into the record, the disappearing Bill of Rights. This is the Bill of Rights that we as members of the Judiciary Committee know it, as adopted in 1791. This is what it is fast becoming. I quote, "The right of the people to be secure in their persons, houses, papers, and effects shall be delegated to the United States." If I might introduce that into the record.
Without objection, so ordered into the record.
We have heard, even though this is not, as the Chairman correctly points out, an impeachment inquiry, this committee has the awesome responsibility to decide whether or not at some point in time to conduct such a momentous inquiry. It is not a responsibility of myself now as a private citizen. But if, in fact, the decision before this committee and the American people is constitutional inquiry or constitutional silence, then by God, I choose constitutional inquiry. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mayor Rocky Anderson.
Thank you very much. Representative Pence and Professor Presser made a comment upon which all of the rest of their following comments was based, and that is that impeachment is to be limited only to those instances where the person being impeached exercised his or her own personal interests above that of the nation. That is atrocious scholarship. It does not reflect what's happened in history. It does not reflect what the founders had to say or the comments made during the ratification convention regarding impeachment. Ed Firmage, who is co-author of To Chain the Dog of War, still the seminal book on the war powers, wrote an article in 1973, Law Review article, about substantive law of impeachment. There he noted that clearly charges of constitutional violations, and here there certainly have been many, discussed, and gross abuses of power for illegitimate purposes should be included as impeachable offenses regardless of the offender's office. And then Professor Firmage goes on to cite this committee, the Judiciary Committee, a statement in 1926, where the Judiciary Committee noted that the better sustained and modern view is that the provision for impeachment in the Constitution applies not only to high crimes and misdemeanors as those words were understood at common law, but also acts which are not defined as criminal and made subject to indictment, but also to those which affect the public welfare. Thus, an official may be impeached for offenses of a political character and for gross betrayal of public interests, also for abuses of betrayal of trusts, for inexcusable negligence of duty, for the tyrannical abuse of power, or as one writer puts it, for a breach of official duties. That has been established beyond any doubt. And I would add just one other thing in terms of the misrepresentations. I would say fraud committed by, we can't name anybody by name here, so I would say by the administration or a high-ranking official of the administration, and that is when this Congress and the American people were told about the security risks to this country posed by Iraq and by the case for war, we were only told one part of the story. We were not told, for instance, besides some of the reports that were noted before, about the dissents by the intelligence agency within the State Department and by the Department of Energy. Their statements in the October National Intelligence Estimate that said there is nothing to back this up about these aluminum tubes being used to help Iraq's supposed nuclear initiative, and there certainly is nothing to this claim about Iraq trying to buy uranium from Niger. It was right there in the National Intelligence Estimate. The President, high-ranking members of the administration, as they were telling we, the American people, and you, the Congress, just the opposite, failed to disclose those dissenting opinions from the State Department and the Department of Energy. That constitutes a fraud which helped lead this country to this disaster in Iraq.